Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life-transforming while delivering a message of hope. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Red Letters Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a topic, the power of a name and or how it affects your belief system, how maybe it's a self-perception that could be either interpreted in a negative way or positive way, depending on what that name means to you and how we embrace the names that we're given and or called. So as we dive into that, does anybody want to share like either a personal experience or what that might mean to you?
So I'll start by asking you guys, since you guys are here present and your children are too. But when you thought about your children, Tony and Ida, what was it specific? Like when you thought about their names and why? Like why would you name them a certain name? And I only throw that out there because obviously you guys know that I did not grow up in the church, didn't know anything about the church. But when people would ask what my kids' names were, they're like, oh, you're very biblical. I'm like, no, I'm not. I didn't know Andrew, Chris, and Jacob were in the Bible. So those were my first three kids. And they're like, oh, you went with the Bible. And I didn't. But I know that God had something in mind when I didn't know what I was doing. So I wonder if you guys were intentional with the name.
Actually, we did. You want to go ahead and mention that?
No, I was intentional. I wanted to find a biblical godly name for each one, but more than anything, if I think about like Anthony the oldest, I hadn't really fully given my life to God at the time when I was trying to choose his name, but I believe his name was given to me by God because I had like a list of boys' names on a piece of paper, and I just kept looking at them, and then I knew that for me he was an answered prayer, that he was a gift. So when I chose Anthony, it basically meant that he was a gift of God. And then even his middle name, Alexander. And I believe Alexander.
No, that meant more like ruler of the people.
Ruler of the people. And then when it came to Ruth, I had some names in mind, but Ruth was not technically one of the names I really wanted.
I was the one that picked
Actually,
that one.
It was funny because Dolores, she actually shared,
She was
I would
kinda
say
like
my
a
spiritual mom.
mother. Yeah.
She shared that name with me. And I was like, oh, I don't know about Ruth, Yeah. And it took a minute for me to really grasp that name. But that finally, I really believe God just said, this is what I want you to call her, Ruth. And we both agreed on Ruth.
And that meant a friend of God.
A friend of God. And then her middle name's Rebecca, which means captivator.
One who beholds beauty.
Yeah.
Oh.
So did you guys look up the names before? Oh, you guys did
Yeah, we
research
did.
them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then you guys went to prayer with like a list of them, or is it more like?
Well, like yours and Santee's name, I genuinely wanted James and John, but he didn't want them to sound too American. He wanted them to sound
more pop, more the common names. I didn't want common
he didn't want
names.
so common. But I'm like, James and John, those are strong names. And so when he said Santiago and Giovanni, I agreed to. I'm the one who actually brought up Giovanni because I was trying to find other meanings to John and James. Oh. I believe that's what it was because
I don't know.
And because I spelt it instead of spelling it Giovanni, I spelt it Giovonni to make it different.
Yeah, that's messed me up my whole life. Everyone spells my name every other way except the real way.
But I think one of the things that we looked at is we wanted the first name to be almost like a compelling name between them and God, and then the second name to actually be a strong name. So that's why Gio, his middle name was Victor. We wanted him to be victorious. Yeah. And then Dominic was Angelo. That means almost like an angelic ruler or being. Yeah. So I think Santee's the only one we messed up on.
No, no.
Well,
I
I'm
mean,
saying as far as finding a good meaning, you know what I mean? Because his name, it all goes well together, but just the meaning
Now I wanna
ended
know
up
what it is.
meaning a
he
dark
has an. If
skinned
you ask
person.
him who delivered you,
Like a moreno. That's
it's
what
the
it
name
means.
of his
but
doctor's
it's,
name.
Mauricio.
Mauricio.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Mauricio.
Santi Mauricio.
Santiago Mauricio.
Oh, okay.
Mauricio.
That's like a hard school.
Yeah.
Like,
But we did want them all to sound good and to go with the last name. So it kind of felt like it was a package deal, if you will, the name.
You guys were very strategic then. That's awesome. Yeah.
But there is for sure power in the name, and that's kind of what we looked at too. We didn't want to give names that we knew, you know, like even in the Bible, there's a lady that turned around and named her son Ichabod because that's when the Ark of the Covenant was taken from the Jewish people, and they said the glory of God departed. So therefore, I'm going to name my son Ichabod, meaning the glory has departed. So imagine that kid going through life knowing every time they call him, oh yeah, remember the glory of God left when you were born. That's pretty tough. So the name, you know, once we realize not just what we say, but those names in particular. Right. So if you think about it, when you're calling somebody a name, you know, let's just say I'm calling Gio Victor. Okay, every day I'm saying, you're victorious, you're victorious, you're victorious. So it's that repetition of making that declaration, because a name is technically a declaration. We don't look at it that way, but that's the power behind it. So
That is so good. Yeah.
What about you and Santi? How you guys turned around and changed your names to James and John?
well, we didn't
No way.
change them.
Did
No,
you?
Share a
so,
little bit about that and why.
so my whole thing is like when I felt like my relationship with God was getting really like serious. I was reading in the Bible how He would change people's names, like from Simon to Peter, and I feel like there's a few other ones. Yeah. Oh, like you know, Jacob, Israel, all that, Abraham, yeah. So for me, I was like, I want to be a new creation, like in a way. So I felt like it was a right heart behind it, but in the end, it just confused everyone. And so I was telling, you know, customers, my name's John and everything. So a few customers still call me John, but I liked the name John too. And then I call Santi James. Mm-hmm. And we were going to start like a film company called Sons of Thunder, because in the Bible, James and John were the sons of Zebedee. Yeah. And so they were known as the Sons of Thunder. So that was my whole thing, but you know, it wore off. I think it's just easier for everyone. I like my name Giovanni. Okay. Yeah, because when I say Gio, everyone thinks I say Jill or something other, like just the way I pronounce it, I guess. Mm-hmm. It's just hard for people to hear.
And you talked about the spelling. I apologize because I always, when I text, it's Geo. I didn't know it was Gio.
No, yeah, everyone does. Starbucks.
Really? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, so okay. Now going back to why you chose their name. What did you think about your own name? Because I don't know. Did your parents take that kind of time and be strategic with your name? I wonder. My parents weren't. They were fighting, and my dad had told my mom not to name my brother. It's only 11 months older than me. Not to name him his name, which is Umberto. And my mom ended up naming him that. So when I was born, my dad said, you will give her your name. And my mom was like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to give her. You guys probably don't know my middle name. Huh? No. It's like, you're going to give her your name. And I hated my name growing up, but it's Maria Elena. But in my birth certificate, it says Mary Helen. I was like, so who am I? But I thought, okay, so Elena, Mary, Helen, one of those has to stick. So for the longest time, I didn't like it, but I really did not like being called Maria because everybody just assumed like Maria, the white kids at school. But I've grown to like it. Well, I'm already here. Like I've grown to like the name Mary, but I wonder with you, like, did you feel your parents took time?
Actually, real quick, I remember, I think it was in a home group, you had mentioned that if you could pick a name, it was Elizabeth, wasn't it? Oh, no, Alejandra.
Alejandra.
Yeah.
Alejandra.
Yeah, I was like, that's cool that you think about what name you would have liked.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think I got my name from my first name, Antonio, let me rewind it. My first name, technically, when I was born, was Francisco. And that was actually my grandma, who I dearly love. It was her dad's name. So that's where I got Francisco, the first name. Okay. Then my middle name was Antonio, which was my stepdad's best friend's name. And then my last name when I was born was actually Olson, which was my same stepdad's last name. So that's how my name was growing up. But then as I grew up, I had like an identity crisis, if you will, because one, I didn't know who my stepdad was. I didn't know the friend of my stepdad. So those two names I didn't know. I actually realized that Francisco was actually my grandma's dad's name a little later on. So what happened for me is I turned around when I think it was right after I graduated high school. I went to my uncles and my grandpa and said, hey, is there a way that I could go ahead and legally change my last name? And they were like, yeah, they were ecstatic about it, especially my uncles. Well, actually all three of them, because my grandpa just always took pride in his last name. But my two uncles, of course, they know that was their last name, but they didn't really take so much pride because that name carried a lot of baggage because of some of the things that would take place with some of the men that had that last name. And I didn't. I had no clue about that when I came asking to change my last name. And then when I did, and I said, hey, is that okay to do that? Then all of a sudden, my two uncles in particular got really excited that I was wanting their last name. And I said, the reason why is because I identify with you guys. You guys are the ones that raised me. So then I went back and legally changed my name, and I rotated the first two names. So now it's Antonio and Francisco. I actually cut that in half. So it's actually Cisco. Oh, okay. And then Gudino is the last name. And then when I went back and told my grandma, oh, look, I showed her the thing, and her heart like dropped. And she's like, what? And then that's when I realized that Francisco was her dad's name. And I just cut it in half. And I was like, oh, I did not do that. And I would have left it. Yeah. But going through school, everyone used to call me Francisco. And because you have that name, everybody thinks you know Spanish. Yeah. So that was like a shot in the foot for me because everybody would talk to me in Spanish. And I go, that's my name, but no, I don't speak Spanish. Oh, wow. You know what I mean? So that was kind of like one of those negative things. But that's kind of how the name affected me. And, you know, it was weird. It kind of like felt like a little missing piece of the puzzle because I identified with that name.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wanted you to share that story, Tony, because you had shared it with me last week. And I just thought how the name Gudino carries something for you, but it also changed a lot within that family, the bloodline. So I thank you for sharing that because you say like, oh, you know, it's not a big deal. But I think, I don't know, but for me, I just took it as like, wow, this is huge. And I'll share that with you guys because of my last name. And my husband's last name is Gonzalez. I did not change my last name. And I remember having this conversation with my husband. And I said, do you mind if I keep Mir? And it's interesting because growing up in the town that I grew up in, Big Spring, Texas, with population like 7 people. So I was one of, everybody knew us. And when anybody talked to one of my siblings or I, they would always say, you have to be a Mir. And there was nothing good behind it. It was always like, oh, which ones of the Mirs are you? And I always felt bad about it, especially growing up where I grew up because everybody did. And I guess once you're a certain person, you look like all those other people. So everywhere we went, even if they didn't know us, as soon as you mentioned the last name, they were like, oh, we know the Mirs. And I just always thought, oh, that's horrible. I can't wait to change my name. I can't wait till I never have to use this name again. But I come out to California and there's no other Mirs. No one, everywhere that I would go, I was always looking for the name and I never saw it anywhere. So when obviously my husband and I were going to get married, I asked him, is it okay if I keep my last name? And he's like, why? And I go, I don't know. Everybody has Gonzalez. Like every other person is named Gonzalez. I think this is different. And he was like, okay, that's fine. I always thought I'll hyphenate it something. I didn't. But the reason that I didn't do it was because something in me said, this is going to change. This name is going to carry weight one day. And I don't know which ones of my cousins, because there's so many of us, have gone on to do and be proud of their name. But I have come to a place where I'm really proud of who I became, maybe not so much of who I was, but who I became and how I was able to change that in my bloodline. And I will continue to do that. So yeah, the Mir won't be tarnished forever. So that's why I think a name is really important and what it carries. Yeah.
Wow. Actually, just one quick question. Your kids, did they take your name or his last name, just out of curiosity?
No, so Gonzalez. My boys are Gonzalez.
Oh, okay, okay.
The younger ones.
Got it,
And
got
the
it.
other ones have their last name.
Okay, okay. Got it, got it. I just didn't know if any of them took the last name, your maiden name, because that's what I did with my mom.
Okay.
That Gudino is my mom's maiden name. I didn't know if any of them kept your maiden name. That's why I was asking.
Jacob, my son Jacob kept my
okay.
maiden name. Yeah.
Got it.
So he will be the mirror that carries on
Got
the
it.
last name. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Ida has an interesting view on this.
I want to see. Yeah. I want to hear. I
Did I really go there?
Put your seatbelts on.
Well, no, my name originally I was supposed to be called Aida Luz. So one name. So it was going to be Aida Luz. But then the hospital messed up the writing of my name and put Aida as the first name and Luz as the middle name. And then my maiden name was Lemaire. And so I'm Aida Luz Lemaire. So Luz, of course, is Spanish for light.
Right.
And then Aida, Ruth just looked it up, which is kind of cool. It's Arabic. But then it could be Filipino too, because I always get like mixed. Like Filipinos come tell me, "Oh yeah, that's a popular name for in in the Philippines, whatever." But it says returner, visitor, little fire, happy, helper, distinguished, and then it says moon or gift, which is kind of cool. And then my maiden name actually is French for, I want to say, the ocean,
Okay.
La Mer, but I'm pronouncing it, probably I'm butchering it. Oh, yeah. So since I didn't keep my maiden name, which I was like, when he shared a little bit about yours, I was like, man, I go, why didn't I keep my maiden name, and stuff like that. But he's like, come on, But I ended up naming the soap company after my dad's name because I felt like really, even his sons, nobody's really carrying his name the way he would have in a positive light. Oh, okay. So I felt like, you know what, this is at least the best I can do is put that as
That's awesome.
as a name. But I want to say actually, oh no. Okay. No, I changed it actually.
But I think it was a little conversation I think we did have before getting married where she was considering wanting to keep the name. And for me, I don't know if I would have married her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
And,
interesting.
and I know it's kind of a strong statement, but I don't know if it's just the old school part of me or if it was even, I don't
Pride.
know. I wasn't, my heart wasn't coming from pride, but I just felt like if we're going to have conflict with that, I foresee conflict in the future. Yeah. So that's why for me, because, I don't know. I know that I'm called to lead my family, lead my home and all that stuff. And I just felt that was part of a visible indicator of that, if you will. Okay. You know what I mean? So that was just me. And I really don't think it was pride, even though she'll keep saying it was. I really felt that it was like, for me, it was a glimpse of what's to come. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? That's just like my interpretation from a man's point of view. And I was just speaking for myself. I know other people have their different views, but for me, that was a struggle. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do have nephews that have the maiden name, Lemaire. Yeah, their last name, because my brother, his sons.
Okay, nice.
So they carry his name.
So where does the name come from? I'm curious. Lemaire, because I had
It's French.
French. Okay.
Yeah.
Because you said I'm butchering it. I was like, well, okay.
Yeah, I'm not pronouncing it the way you should pronounce it.
No,
I can't
okay.
even pronounce it like
Lemaire.
that. But you know what's crazy? I heard my brother was sharing this with me because he did some research on our history, and it looks like when my dad came to the States from Belgium, originally his name's actually spelled Lamare, but for some reason when my dad came to the States, he changed it to Lamaire.
Oh.
And then so I heard, and then my dad's relationship though with my parents or my grandparents were really, really bad. Like he didn't want anything to do with them because they had abandoned him and brought my sister to the States, but left my dad with his uncle. So when my dad came to the States, apparently he added one or two, I think a letter or so to the name and changed it to Lemaire. So I don't know how true that is, but then I hear too, like when there's another generation or you're starting another, like, I don't know what's the right word to use, a tribe or maybe another generation where there'll be a male who will kind of like cut themselves off and if you add a letter or two to your name, then you start a whole different generation under that name or something like that. I don't know, I'm probably saying it wrong, but
I think for me, when it came to marrying Jess, we had the same topic because her maiden name was Lopez. Yeah, Lopez. And I think she was quick to switch because there's like how there's so many Gonzalez's, there's Lopez's everywhere. And so I would joke around. I was like, "Oh, I'll take your last name," just because her dad didn't have any sons, and I was joking. But
Oh, looking at Tony.
yeah, no, it was a joke.
Yeah.
But I think it's crazy because for her middle name, it's Victoria, and we didn't know this till like later on in life, where my middle name's Victor, her middle name's middle name's Victoria. Yeah, so Jessica Victoria
is
Gudino,
funny.
Giovanni Victor Gudino.
oh, how crazy.
I think
that's
that's
so
sick,
cute.
yeah.
Very victorious family there.
Yeah.
Nice. Oh.
So your first daughter will be Victoria?
I think it's a pretty name. I don't know.
Yes. Oh.
And then your first son would be Victor. Victor and Victoria. There you go. Twins.
No, don't speak that over me.
Yeah, but I think the whole thought of a name ends up affecting, like, it easily can affect our identity, how we see ourselves or view ourselves. And I think it's important for us to kind of understand. And if you don't know what your name means, maybe you should look it up, because sometimes, like, I know that some like, I know even in Africa and some of these other areas, a lot of times they'll even name their children what they want them to become. That's the thought behind it. So they're not just picking random things. I know we kind of touched on that earlier, but to turn around and not predict, but kind of like declare something that as something that isn't as though it was is kind of like naming something or someone a name on something that you plan them to walk out in later on in life. So I think that's a powerful thing. Like we were talking about some of the names, and I was just looking them up, like how in the Bible there's Abram, and he went to Abraham. Abram meant an exalted father, and God changed it, saying, I want you to not just be that, but I want you to be father to the nations. And then his wife Sarai, who went to Sarah, her first naming was Sarai, which meant princess. And God said, no, it's not just that. I need you to be mother to the nations, so change it to Sarah. I'm sorry. And just the different reasons why God will turn around and change somebody's name. And then one of the ultimate names that carries the most weight ever is the name Jesus. It says that demons turn around and tremble at that name because of the weight of what that name represents and who it is. You know what I mean? So that's the highest level of seeing the impact of a name. You see somebody going through certain things and you start declaring the name of Jesus, things have to change. It's not optional. And I don't know, I think that we need to kind of keep that in mind too, just moving forward. If you don't have kids yet and you have the opportunity to name something or someone, make sure you put meaning behind it. And then here's another one that I thought of. Imagine Adam's job. He had to name every animal that we see today. One, you got to look at how intellectual the guy had to be. Yeah. He's right there consumed with God on the day-to-day, and he's turning around and the elephant walks by and you're going to be called the elephant. You're the tiger. I don't even know if I could even come up with as many names as he did. And I was just thinking about that. One, how long it must have took. And then how he had every name that was different. He didn't repeat himself. You know what I mean? It's just amazing to see that task that God gave him to do and how impactful it was, and everyone became its name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the whole thing with names too, it's like goes back to our words. Kind of like how we were talking before recording, how your words, you could speak life or death. Like the power of the tongue is so strong. And even like I have cousins on Jess's side who aren't really believers, but they were raised Catholic. But right now they consider themselves not believers, but they know when they've encountered like either, some kind of like, like a dark activity, like 'cause some of them have experienced like I don't know, like not witchcraft, but like, like demons or ghosts and stuff. Something inside them are like Jesus. They have to say that name, and they're not believers, but they believe in the name, which is
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah.
And so it boggles my mind, like how can someone believe in the name, the power of a name, but not in the person, if that makes sense. But it's the power of the tongue.
Actually, as you were saying that, I was actually thinking of something else. How the name carries so much weight, but there's actually something almost a little bit higher than that. And I was just thinking about this when you were talking. If you turn around and you went to the store and you see all these, let's just say, no-name brand shoes, and then you see Nike, you're going to already think the price is going to cost more because it's a name brand. It carries weight. It's well known. It's been established. But a lot of these companies that branded their name, they've branded it so well now that now they could just put an image. They could just put the swoosh on a building and you know what it is. So not only do we have a name, but we have to look at we're in God's image. So that's that same image that we have placed on us, but many times we don't see ourselves that we are actually walking out the image of God. We're a reflection of him. We're God-like with the lowercase g. I'm not saying equal or any of that to God, but we're in God's image. And that, I think, whether let's just say you have a name that might not mean something great. The overriding factor is that you're living out God's image. You have his reflection on you. You have God inside of you, but whether you, and I'm not just saying, what do you call it? Haphazardly or anything like that, but to see the fruit of that, of course, we have to have a relationship with him. So I'm not just saying everyone has God in them and, live as good as you can. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we're made in his image, but to utilize that, we have to have a relationship with him. But the highest level of us being able to self-reflect and see who we are and our own perspective and our identity rests on knowing that he made us in his image. And there's a lot of peace that comes with that.
I wonder, I'm going to throw this out there because that's really good what you said, Tony. And it's like, because now you don't even need the word Nike to check. The brand is already out there, which is really great. So what about an individual? Because we're doing this for people that are listening that doesn't like their name. You guys mentioned a name in the beginning. What was that name that you guys? Yeah. Ichabod. Like that was, it's horrible. I've never heard of that, but it's like, I can imagine growing up with that. So what would you say to individuals today that are living with this name? It may not be Ichabod, but if their name represents something like that, would you say, okay, we'll change it? And I love how, Gio said, well, I'm John, and I'm going to, so even if it didn't stick, you felt the John. So I'm wondering, is it, like, would you encourage somebody to?
Well, of course, I know legally you can do that. It kind of the older you get, there's a lot of stuff you have to do to make sure everything stays lined up. Right. But to be honest with you, it could even just be as simple as you just having a nickname that means something better. To you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I was looking that up in the Bible. It says Revelations 2:17. He says, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the scripture or what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give some of the hidden manna to eat, and I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name written, which no one knows except him who receives it."
Oh, wow.
What?
That's really
so
nice.
In the end, to those who are obedient, who make it, basically God's saying he'll give you a new name.
Are you serious?
And that nobody knows but
never
him.
read that. Wow.
So if you're not happy with your name right now,
Don't worry.
God's going to give you a new one.
And it still falls back on you need a relationship with him.
You still have a relationship.
Exactly.
Yes, that's so good.
Otherwise, you won't hear what that name was.
You won't know unless, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can give yourself a nickname and you can change your name, but your name is your name. You know what I mean? And I think honestly, if you're not happy with your name, you just need to grasp it. And like Tony said, you know, you can give yourself a nickname or maybe even look up the definition, like how mine had different definitions of it or meanings to it. You can take one of those positives and apply it to your name and run with it, you know? I don't believe, you know, like most people, when they give their children names, they don't think about the meaning.
Right.
On the average, I don't think everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to name my son Victor because he's going to be victorious. I don't think, you know, on the average, somebody does that. Right. So for somebody who doesn't have a name that they like, find something good with it, you know, find the good in it, you know, it really, it's the person behind the name.
Right.
You know, we can talk about the meaning and how much, you know, it does carry weight, but reality is, who are you as a person? You know, are you going to walk out what that meaning is? Meaning that if it's a negative meaning, you know, are you going to be that person who behaves like that? Or are you going to change that? Because I believe you can change the outcome of the meaning of your name.
Yeah. I thought that was really cool. And your thought behind your last name, I was like, that's a cool idea. Not just an idea, but to turn around and make it mean something. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I think that, you know, sometimes you could go live life and like there was one, I think it was I was somewhere doing something and I think it was a customer came up and turned around and he had seen my last name and he goes, hey, do you know a Joe? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, does he work over here? I go, yeah. I said, that's my uncle. As soon as that name kind of like brought a positive feedback or experience with this particular guy, and he's like, oh man, he started bragging about my uncle. And it was just so cool that even how your name echoes and impacts people that you don't even know who it impacts. Yeah. And because of how you choose, what you choose to make of the name, you know what I mean? And I think that's a real good thing to keep in mind in how we live and the integrity you keep, the way you treat people, the way you love, all of those different things are wrapped up into the name that you're representing and making a name for. And it's not, it shouldn't be no arrogance or pride, you know, heart behind it, but it's just the weight that it can carry, you know, opening a conversation with somebody. It's just amazing.
Well,
Yes, that's so true.
I'm sorry.
No,
I know. I was just thinking of your uncle because at one point he wasn't proud of the name Gudino. Yeah. He didn't, you know, he hated it. Yeah. He hated the name, but it wasn't until, you know, he started seeing our family, like even Dominic with the football and just things, how God had started using our family in certain ways, you know, started giving him more, how do you say it? He started taking more pride into his name. Oh, okay. But at one point he hated it. Yeah. But now it's the opposite. He's really proud of it.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, even like when we'd go to the Aztec games and everyone's wearing the shirts and stuff like that, because we printed up a bunch of shirts that looked like jersey with the name in the back and everything. And I remember him 2 or 3 times minimum, he'd turn around and he'd go, you know what? Just looking at that name on the shirt just like makes my heart smile. Just because of what you guys are making of it. Because there's no way I would ever fathom that this would even be a thing. You know what I mean? So what we do with our name and the way that we walk out this journey and this process of life and stuff like that carries way more weight than we actually imagine.
Oh, yes. And really quickly, I just wanted to add, because I think this is important. So many years ago, I was working at a company and you wear a certain uniform and you can wear your name tag, but it has the name of the company there. But they said during the orientation, they would say, when you're out and about, take off our uniform. We don't want that name to be tarnished in any way. And I thought, it's a company, like it probably won't even last, like in my head, but the importance of the name and how you represent it, just like Ida said, it's not so much the name or what it meant. It's how you represent that name. So that's where my wheel started turning many years ago. It's like, I don't like the name, but what will I bring to it? How will I represent myself? Will I continue to do what's been done, or will I do something different? So, if you think about it, you go out there and one of the things they said, don't ever wear your uniform to a bar because you'll give us a bad name. Don't ever wear the uniform if you're engaging in, any type of activity that doesn't present as well. So that's what I thought, like, oh, wow. So anything that you do, don't present yourself well, and don't put yourself in those situations where you'll have that negative impact on your name. So I just think that's interesting. Yeah.
And I would also say too, for people who don't necessarily like their name, because I love my name, I think I appreciate it more that I'm older. Because anytime I go through a rough patch, I'm like, but I'm a friend of God. And then it pushes me, moves me forward. But I think too, for people who are have really a name that maybe doesn't mean the greatest thing, because once you Google it, it's like you can't unsee what you see, Yeah. And I think it's important to remember what Mom said about Revelations, where it's the Lord will give you a new name, but also to read the Bible. What I love is that the Lord is constantly reminding us and telling us who we are to Him. Yeah. And I think it's in Ephesians 1 or 2, don't hold me on it, but it goes through this list of I am a child of God, I am blessed, I am forgiven, I am redeemed. It goes through this whole list. And I feel if, let's just say you Google your name and you don't like any of the words that come up, read the Bible and pick one there and say, I'm going to hold on to that. Because at the end of the day, who He says we are is more important than what our parents called us, That's so cool. Yeah.
So in closing, remember, your name does carry weight, but don't believe that it's who you are unless you want to represent or become something better, who God called you to be. So we thank you so much for listening. We can't wait to talk to you again. Thank you for tuning into Red Letters Podcast.